Okay, wait, there it is. Okay. Welcome to the Port Huron Statement. Today, we're going to talk about charlatanism. This monologue is titled The Emperor's New Prayers. Ladies and gentlemen, gather around for a tale as old as time itself. A story how fear, hope, and human ignorance, as well as gullibility, can be farmed and fertilized, packaged, marketed, and manipulated as a means to make more efficient and expedient your exploitation through the prevention of your development and the development of critical thinking skills, and not unlikely an added cost will be financial. The exploitation parallels Tartuffe precisely. Extraction of wealth without conscience, leveraging the divine without authenticity and with intention to deceive, and seeking to sexually and socially dominate women or anyone that doesn't have the status to be taken seriously by the ignorant organ and those he represents. The psychology of the sacred scam. The modern religious charlatan is part magician, part therapist, and part used car salesman. They will solve problems at the cost of your very person. They will create deceptions that appear as miracles but are in fact clever sleight of hand or application of technology. The psychological manipulation is baked into the entire charade. They've created social isolation and sold our community back to us in the form of a judgmental and arbitrarily hierarchical God. There's a stark contrast between the God they advertise and the one they worship. They've weaponized our most basic human needs, the need for belonging, for purpose, for hope in the face of uncertainty. They understand something that legitimate religious leaders often forget. People aren't just looking for spiritual guidance, they're looking for someone to tell them that they're special, chosen, and just one prayer away from solving all of their problems, or one action, or one donation. These spiritual snake oil salesmen have perfected what psychologists call confirmation bias on steroids. They create environments where questioning is reframed as lacking faith, where poverty is your fault for not believing hard enough, and where every random coincidence becomes a divine miracle worthy of a testimonial video. The genius, and I use that term very loosely, lies in their understanding of cognitive dissonance. When the promised miracle doesn't arrive, it's never the system that's broken. It's never their word that's false. It's always the believer who didn't believe hard enough or didn't give enough, didn't pray with sufficient enthusiasm or criticized the church or maybe became friends with someone that the church didn't approve of. It's the perfect crime because the victim always is encouraged to blame themselves. Now, let's speak on spiritual warfare and the rhetoric that surrounds it. The theological equivalent of spiritual warfare is that of seeing monsters under your bed. Except those monsters apparently require monthly donations to be kept at bay and managed. You need a life coach to assist in their management as well. This concept has transformed everyday life into a cosmic battle between good and evil, where your mortgage payment becomes a demonic attack on your teenager's attitude, and your teenager's attitude is clearly the work of Satan himself. The beauty of this framework from the charlatan's perspective is that it makes everything significant and nothing is coincidental. Stubbed your toe, that's because you had been attacked by a demon. You lost your keys, that's the devil trying to keep you away from church or some obligation. And oftentimes it's directly utilized as a mechanism to encourage absolute loyalty and ever heightening tithing. Give more, commit more, question less, and these problems don't arise. The This paranoid worldview serves multiple purposes. It keeps followers in a constant state of anxiety. Anxious people are less likely to make good decisions, and they'll also literally encourage states of anger or emotionality to prevent you from making good decisions and force you to make decisions in those instances, like forcing you to sign something or make some critical decision or some type of commitment. It explains why any criticism is explained away as demonic influence, and this paranoid worldview allows the positioning of the religious leader as the only reliable source of protection, the only way that you can prevent your ultimate victimization by these demonic forces. You can't see them, but when you can, and you only, can thanks to the intercedence of the divine hierarchy. None of this is new, of course. We're simply witnessing yet another iteration of a con game, and really a psyop, that's been running since humans first figured out that some people will pay handsomely for the privilege of being told what they want to hear, or the privilege of being closer to God than someone else, or the certainty that these people offer them, or the community, but ultimately what they're getting isn't really what they need or they're desiring, and really these people are told what they need and what they want, and that's a core problem. In medieval times, they utilized indulgences to manipulate people's desires and monetize them, and when indulgences couldn't be afforded, that was a manipulation of poverty to force higher loyalty proportional to financial contribution. So if you're not going to financially contribute to the church, you better fucking, put your shoulder to the wheel. But these indulgences were literally get out of hell free cards, and they still exist, by the way, in the Catholic Church. Purchased for the right price or the right commitment. I mean, now it's a commitment. That's a whole other story in the Catholic Church. The Catholic Church basically invented the concept of spiritual subscription services centuries before Netflix figured it out. Worried about your soul? Subscribe to our salvation package with 50% off for purgatory. And that's the thing too, is it's a product that you get when you die. The American frontier gave us tent revivals and traveling evangelists who understood that people living in isolation and hardship were particularly susceptible to promises of divine intervention. And this is why isolating these individuals is crucial to this manipulation. If someone's isolating you, making it so you can't talk to certain people for arbitrary reasons or because they're demonic or whatever, that is spiritual manipulation. It's that simple. Anything that's true invites criticism. Because if we're trying to discover what's true, truth is solidified by questioning and criticism, and it's more clearly elucidated by criticism and asking questions. Like understanding gravity, you can understand that what goes up must come down, but then to understand the acceleration, to understand that it's variable from sea level based on altitude, to understand that it's proportional based on mass and all these other things. These are different levels of understanding gravity. The same could be said about anything that is true. So anyone who is trying to prevent you from criticizing or questioning or looking into something does not want you to know the truth. They want to keep you ignorant to exploit your ignorance. So anyone that tells you to avoid certain information or certain people because they're potentially damaging to your spiritual health in any way, they are almost certainly manipulating your ignorance. So anyway, where am I at here? Those early entrepreneurs of the eternal established the template that modern megachurch pastors still follow, and the high control groups as well. Create emotional intensity, promise specific benefits, and always pass the collection plate while people are still feeling the high. In addition, create commitments. Create means by which people are forced to continually come back. And there are innumerable ways to do this. The crown jewel of the religious charlatan has to be prosperity and the gospel, the theological equivalent of telling someone they can lose weight by eating more cake. This particular strain of spiritual nonsense has convinced millions that God essentially operates like a cosmic vending machine. Insert prayer plus donations, receive wealth and health. The plant a seed concept. The prosperity gospel preachers have figured out how to make poverty a moral failing and wealth a spiritual achievement. They've created a system where the poor are told they're poor because they lack faith, they lack internal value or virtue, while the rich are celebrated as obviously blessed by God. It's a theological shell game that would make P.T. Barnum weep with envy. These modern apostles of avarice live in mansions, fly in private jets, and wear watches worth more than most people's cars, all while telling their followers that material possessions aren't the core of what matters. The cognitive dissonance is overwhelming. The modern religious charlatan employs a sophisticated array of psychological manipulation techniques that remind one of a casino. One crucial element of all of these cults and these charlatans is love bombing. New converts, professional converts are showered with attention, affection, acceptance, maybe gifts. Whatever they want is made as though it will be provided to them in infinitum if they were to join this church. It's like the honeymoon phase of an abusive relationship, except the abuser wears a cross and speaks in tongues. Then, after this initial phase, you go into an isolation phase. Gradually, followers are encouraged to distance themselves from friends and family who don't share their very specific and demanding beliefs. They just don't understand your journey becomes the refrain, effectively cutting off outside perspectives that might introduce inconvenient questions. And this allows for absolute echo chamber effects. And this is what allows for people to be truly exploited when their entire social system is reiterating a charlatan's message. And then this is... The ace in the hole is financial entanglement, pocketing people's businesses or their jobs or their lives. Once someone has invested significantly in an organization or become adequately coalesced in an organization through employment or through other means, through tithing, through special offers, offering seed gifts, and again, or maybe even through employment, they become psychologically committed to believing it's all legitimate. Nobody wants to admit they've been conned out of their life savings. Furthermore, a lot of people end up being dependent on the congregation for some type of livelihood. And that's another invisible cage. And then this results in learned helplessness. Followers are taught that they cannot interpret Scripture or understand God's will without the guidance of the leader. This creates a dependency that's both spiritual and psychological. We can go back to the financial as well, because a lot of the times these people are told that they lack the, and it actually can be true, that they lack the social connections to gain employment or to support their families without these church connections. So that's a huge amount of leverage. A lot of them end up getting housed through church connections. So that's a massive amount of leverage. Nothing quite captures a cynical theater of religious charlatanism like the healing service. Picture the scene: dramatic lighting, emotional music, and a charismatic leader who apparently has God's personal cell phone number. These events are a masterclass in psychological manipulation and stage magic. Healings typically involve conditions that are either psychological in nature or impossible to verify. Mysteriously, we never see amputees growing limbs, or people with Down syndrome suddenly developing typical chromosomes. There is a placebo effect which is real and powerful, and charlatans will exploit it endlessly. They understand that in the right environment, with enough emotional intensity, social pressure, and implied power, people will genuinely feel better temporarily. The effect wears off, and it always does. The failure is attributed to the individual's lack of faith or the waning of that faith, never to the fraud of the system. Modern religious charlatanism has evolved into sophisticated personality cults, where the leader becomes virtually indistinguishable from the divine message they supposedly represent. Now, this isn't entirely true all the time. What we're seeing also is that in modern high-control groups, they'll have a less singular leader to make it more difficult to legislate the entire apparatus. However, the hierarchical nature is absolute. There will always be a deeply hierarchical nature and profound penalties for not following the hierarchical system to the letter. Whoever is above you in this hierarchy's word becomes unquestionable, their lifestyle becomes an aspiration, and their financial needs or their financial capacity become divine, whether in their need or desire or in their accumulation of wealth and ability to be generous. I would tell you that you should always question anyone that's in a position of power or authority. Yeah, I guess the saddest part of this whole charade isn't the financial exploitation, though that's certainly tragic. It's the way that charlatans corrupt the very human impulses that make human beings noble, our desire towards empathy and altruism, the quest for something real, some form of meaning, and the desire to belong, I suppose. People's genuine hunger for something more, some form of transcendence, becomes a vulnerability, and ultimately, rather than being transformed into a tool of collective improvement, it's a tool of universal disempowerment. It's important to be critical, and it's important not to be vulnerable to people telling you things not because they're true or because they authentically believe they're helpful to you or that they authentically even believe them, but because they will benefit from your believing these pieces of information. And that's become the common trait of this entire society, which is really, it's devolved into absolute scamocracy. And sadly, people utilize religion to exploit other people more than almost anything else. And it's been wildly successful. And so think about the real motivations that are driving any of your beliefs or rituals or the religious paradigms that you find yourself under. Because there are a lot of predatory, high control group Christian organizations that are out there. And though some of these groups can be quite powerful, they're not absolutely powerful. Just say no, like for real. Contact me if that's a problem. Seriously. Port _ Huron at proton.me. Have fun.